Very good evening. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
joining us.
And thank you for joining us. First of all, is your life as a diplomat in Bangkok back to normal yet? With the easing of all the shutdown measures?
No, it's not quite back to normal. A big focus of our work is still repatriation flights and organising for Australians who normally would live in Thailand to be able to come back here. So a bigger consular focus than normal, and it's always our biggest consular post anyway, so that's an addition. And we also find that agendas are probably slipped about 6 months on most very important issues. So we are getting back to normal life, but not there yet.
Yeah. All right, so when we invited you to be in this program, we told you that the focus will be on the coronavirus and how you handle it, right? But there was one event in Australia that draws our attention. On Sunday, Australians across the country took part in the Black Lives Matter demonstration, right? The demonstrations were in response to the death of George Floyd, as much as to highlight what the demonstrators see as an entrenched discrimination of Australians, indigenous populations. So how do you think these demonstrations tell us about the situation of racial discrimination in your country?
Well, we certainly do have a history of racial discrimination which we have to address, and the situation of our Indigenous people is still not acceptable in terms of many of the metrics that you might use for young Aboriginal men in jail, or for health, or for income, or for many other things. And so it's a big focus for Australia. I think the link made between the US protests and our protest is not necessarily an organic link, but there is that same sensibility. So happily we didn't see the same sort of violence in our protest, but nonetheless it's a deeply felt concern for many people.
So there was a most recent survey by the Australian National University released on Tuesday, which found that 75% of Australians hold a negative view of the nation's origin inhabitants. Is that close?
Well, that would be a surprise to me, and I'd need to see what was behind that survey, because I think at many levels there's a great pride in Australia at the contribution of Indigenous culture, Indigenous sports people, Indigenous people in all walks of life to Australia, and it's something that sets Australia apart. In my own residence in Bangkok, I have several very large Indigenous works of art. We are proud of our Indigenous the culture and the contribution of our Indigenous people. So that survey result would surprise me a little bit, and I think maybe one would have to look at the questions to see what they thought they were answering.
All right.
And with the move by China to warn against Chinese students to come to Australia because they may face racial discrimination, what would you like to elaborate more on this?
Well, that frankly is a very perplexing warning. I think that the warning is nonsense. Surveys of foreign students in Australia show that more than 95% feel very safe and very comfortable there. They're a very big part and a very important part of our community, the foreign students. One has to remember as well that in a population of about 25 million overall, we have about 1.5 million people of Chinese birth or civilisational background, dating well back to the gold rushes in the 1850s in Victoria. So an entrenched part, a valuable part of Australian society. The Chinese government's warning, you would have to ask them why they made that warning. There's no real evidence of any upsurge against students.
But could the warning be seen as a retaliation to Australia taking a leading role in demanding an international inquiry into the origins of the pandemic, as we know, originated in Wuhan of China?
You're more Machiavellian than I am, but I think obviously there was maybe some discordance with China at the start there, but remember we had a record number of countries, 145, who were co-sponsors of the resolution in the World Health Assembly, and that included Thailand. We're very grateful for that, and that included China. So what we're saying is that if this pandemic has been as bad as it has been, more than 300,000 people dead, very many millions of people have had their lives disrupted. I mean, I don't have to tell Thailand about the economic disruption. Then for sure we all know we are in this together. So if one country has a problem with an epidemic that can become a pandemic, then we all need to be able to act early. We need to be able to stop them from happening, to mitigate the effects and to control them. So I think it would be odd if we said, well, we don't need some sort of an independent, exhaustive inquiry into what happened and how we dealt with it. So Let's see how that works through. But the Chinese Premier has welcomed it, and so hopefully we'll all be on the right track from now.
And during COVID-19 situation in Thailand, you must be quite busy in terms of handling the situation and trying to send Australian back home. But you were facing difficulty on that because of inbound flight ban from Australia.
It's been a great experience. Look, the first thing to say is that our relationship with Thailand is so good that very readily we worked out ways of cooperating. I've been dealing with Kun Busady, your ambassador in Canberra, who's a tremendous colleague. I knew her previously, with Thai Airways and, of course, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We've sent back about 4 flights. We've got another one on next Wednesday. Probably about 1,000 Thai students have come back and 1,000 Australians. That's been very much a joint effort. We've both put the loads so that the plane's full, or at least got some people on it going both ways. We've had to work through air traffic control issues, quarantine issues. You're right to mention that quarantine was a big issue because early on one of the big constraints was a maximum of 200 people coming into Thai quarantine each day. And that was up until a few weeks ago, so that was a big bottleneck, but just now they've boosted it to 500, and the other day the Ministry of Health and the Defence Department announced that they now had taken on an additional 9,000 hotel rooms. So that little aperture has become a big pipe, and we're getting a lot of people back. If you think about the starting point for this, there were so many Thai people overseas working, studying, living, that there was a very big influx coming back. So that was a big problem for us early on. I think we're getting towards the end of it. I hope that this flight that we send next Wednesday, we can finish that and get out of the travel agent business, but maybe I'm wrong.
But do you think in the long term, what will this affect the plan of Australians who plan to live in Thailand or getting married and have like family relations?
Look, there is an issue there, and it's been early on some people raised concerns with them. They said, well, I normally live in Thailand. I want to get back there, so you have to help me. And I thought, but our big focus is getting people out of Thailand back to Australia. But then I realised we have something like 30,000 people living in Thailand normally. There's about 70,000 people of Thai background in Australia. Those 30,000 include people who've got maybe wives or husbands or Thai children or businesses, or they've retired in Thailand. Thailand is their home. And for whatever reason, they were caught when the shutters came down. They're out of Thailand and couldn't get back. Now, I've now come to understand this is a very strong, compassionate need. I've spoken to the Foreign Ministry several times about this, and I think I mentioned it to Prime Minister Prayut when I last met him. And the Thai government's response is, look, we understand and we are sympathetic. These are real cases of need, but we're prioritising getting our own citizens home. And there's a second thing too. There's been almost, as you know, no cases of intra-Thailand virus transmission for about 17 days, a tremendous effort. The cases that are being found are coming in from overseas. That's pretty much the same as Australia. So when Thailand says this to me, I'm disappointed for my Australian friends who want to come into Thailand, but I completely understand Thailand's approach, and they're very tough on it. But that's been the secret of the success of the Thai government in all of this. They have worked out their measures carefully and they've stuck to them.
Australia has been cited as a success story in dealing with the pandemic. I mean, you had a peak of 40 cases a day, I mean, many weeks back. And for the past few days, you have had no single, locally transmitted cases in Australia. So tell us how you did it. How did you manage to contain the spreading of the virus so effectively?
We used Thailand's playbook. So what we did was, I think a very key thing was external controls. We very quickly turned off any ability for people to come back into Australia, apart from our own citizens, of course. We never did that. But we also said our citizens couldn't travel. They had to get permission to go out. So we had it both ways. And that's very similar to what Thailand did, although Thailand didn't stop its own citizens travelling. And then we had bans on mass assemblies, even down to prescribing how many people could go to a wedding, how many people could go to a birthday party. I don't recall the exact figures. It was like 5 for a funeral, 10 for a wedding. So figures were prescribed, and these were policed quite strongly. So with all of those measures in place, and with quite a strong health system and public health policy apparatus there, we were able to get people's understanding and a large degree of compliance with the measures that were put in place. But it's very much like exactly what Thailand did. And we look at what Thailand did and we think it's very impressive.
But you were not as tough as Thailand. You were short of imposing state of emergency.
I didn't mention that. Well, I didn't mention that. We felt that it was a very emergency situation and we acted strongly. We didn't impose a state of emergency, no.
But were you anywhere near making that kind of decision?
No, I don't think we were. I think it's true to say that there have been some interesting developments which are very much Australian flavoured. Okay. And for example, as you know, we're a federation and our different states have imposed their own constraints on other states. And so Australia has a national 14-day quarantine policy if you come back into Australia. Doesn't matter whether it's me or you. But then another state says, well, if you landed in Sydney, you can't come across the border into our state. And so we do have still within Australia differences between the states, but the overall model, the bubble covering Australia is quite strong, 14 days, but no state of emergency.
Can you say that Australia is now out of the woods?
I don't think any of us can say that, and that's a really important thing for us all. We're not out of the woods and neither is Thailand because we don't know, we're all learning with this, we don't know what the second wave could look like. What I see as I go around Bangkok is I see now a lot more people not wearing a mask and they're more relaxed. In a way, this is a wonderful thing. I've even welcomed having some traffic on Tanon Witayu because it shows things are coming back to normal.
You missed that.
Well, we desperately need things to go back to normal for ordinary Thai people, for the economy in Thailand. So I think this is one of the things that because the Thai government has done so well and been so effective in controlling, they now have the luxury of thinking, how do we open up? How do we take a measured approach to removing the virus constraints and to opening up our country? I don't know exactly which way they'll go. As I say, we've been pressuring them to take on board some of those compassionate cases of Australians who would normally live in Thailand. We also want to make sure that as Thailand thinks about maybe its version of a travel bubble or travel relationship with other countries, that they don't forget us. But none of us are rushing into that. We thought about it and have talked about it with New Zealand, but even a country as close to us as New Zealand, which has no virus cases now, we still think it's probably some time before we can put the processes and the measures in place to be able to say, okay, we've got a bubble. So there's a way to go, but in Thailand I see success has given Thailand options of what it wants to do. It's been, as I say, pretty impressive.
Good.
And so far, how about Australians who reside in Thailand? Any particular major concern among them who are still here?
Those who are still there? No. In fact, it's the opposite. We've been trying to encourage them to go home. They love Thailand so much they won't. And some of them come out after being out of contact for months and they say, my plane booking has been cancelled. And you say, yes, the world has changed a little bit since you last paid attention. So there's a lot of people here who are just enjoying themselves in Thailand. There's a lot of people where this is so much their home now that they don't want to go home. Just the other day we gave an award in the Orders of Australian Awards to a fellow down in Phuket who's been there for 20 years, helping local communities, and when people ran short of food, he organised food drives down there, all that sort of stuff. He's been there 20 years. People like him will never go home. So I assume he'll never go home. So no, there's the ones who are still here, they're all happy. I think we had up to 30,000. It has gone down to now more like 3,000. We don't require them to register with us, so that number is a lot smaller. But there's many who want to come back. For example, teachers who teach at international schools, people who've got contracts with big companies, people who have families there. They've got Thai children, half Thai children. So there's a pressure both ways. Yeah.
What about you so far, especially lately? Could you travel anywhere in Thailand?
No way. No,
what is the instruction from Canberra for diplomats?
Well, the instruction from us, I think, is not to take any risks from Canberra. We took a certain approach. Because we've got a lot of Thai staff and a lot of Australian staff, we said we will look at the measures that the Thai government is promulgating and that the Australian government is promulgating, and we will take the highest of each measure. We didn't want our Thai staff and friends to think, well, we're not taking it seriously. And so that involved us banning all of ourselves and our staff from travelling into provincial travel. And so last week when the Thai government relaxed its standards and said you could travel between provinces, a whole lot of my staff went to Hua Hin on the first weekend. Okay. But it's also worth saying that we, early on, I have about 65 or 66 Australian staff out of a total of about 210. Early on, we gave everybody the option. You can go home to Australia if you're worried about this situation. There's no judgment about you. So you think about your family and your own situation. I think about only four out of the 65 went home. And I think they looked at Thailand and they saw, well, good hospitals, good controls emerging. This was very early on, and they decided to stay. And there's recognition as well that in Australia we had virus problems too, as we all did at that stage.
Yeah.
So anyway, that has now worked out quite well.
And how do you see economic impact, social impact from coronavirus in Australia?
It's a really good question. Like every country, we've experienced a very big economic knock. Some of our biggest industries have been very badly damaged by it. Tourism is a big industry. They're trying to do in Australia similar things to what they've tried to do in Thailand, that is to boost the local tourism. Of course, Thailand had 40 million tourists a year. It's very hard to have local tourists replace that. We've got our states are trying to boost their tourism from their own people within their own states. And the other industry that's been very badly damaged, of course, is international education, where we took a lot of students, including Chinese students, but Thai students as well. Those students, many of them can't come back to Australia yet, and so institutions are looking at offshore teaching and trying to find some way to fill the bridge until they can come back. That industry's been very badly damaged. And then, generally speaking, because of trade tensions in the region, but also the gradual global slowing down, we can be seen as a proxy, our economy, for global growth. If the global growth is strong, then we send a lot of food, high quality beef, wine, iron ore, minerals and all that sort of stuff. And at the moment there's a bit of a slowdown. So our economy is affected by that. Socially as well, I think it's caused people to look at their lifestyles, and people are getting used to and quite enjoying some of the things of space and working from home. I don't think things will go back to normal, but we don't know what will happen. People often say to me, when will aircraft flights return to what they were? And I say, I don't think it will return to what they are, but what will replace this? I just don't know. It may be more expensive top-level aviation. It may be a completely different configuration of cabins. Who would be surprised? I never thought that I would sit in a hamburger shop, separated from my partner by perspex and talking over the top of it. So things are changing.
That's a very new normal.
That's novel.
That's what you talk about, new normal, right? So what if there is going to be a new normal for diplomats like yourself, what would it look like?
That's a very good question. I can tell you the thing that the diplomats, my fellow diplomats and I often mention to each other. It's great not having all the national days, important as they are, and not having to go to those night after night after night. None of us miss those. We are thinking about ways to do them in a smaller way. I heard of one mission that's got a sort of a virtual national day, and you tap onto the thing and it shows some culture and some competitions and things like that. We're having to think about a national day even 7 months in advance. We have a lot of fantastic food and wine, but it's very crowded in our national day. I can't imagine us having something like that. So I think that sort of thing has changed, and that's the big high-profile events. But even in my own reception areas and my own dining room, we might have been able to have 20 on a long table, 22 maybe. I don't think we could have more than 10 in there for the moment. So, and on the corner of the table, we have a little sign saying everything has been disinfected, and there's a hand wash pump. So those sorts of things, I think, are probably semi-permanent changes. We're going to be much more careful with our health, and that's a good thing. And no one shakes hands anymore. Thank goodness for Thailand. That's a good lead for us.
Ambassador, you study Thai language back home in the AUS. So if you have to write a speech this year for National Day, even though it will happen virtually, what would be your expression in Thai?
ผมพูดภาษาไทยได้นิดหน่อยแต่เก่งไม่พอสำหรับสัมผัสเป็นภาษาไทยครับ That's what I would say. So I don't know what I would say, but I'm beginning to wonder about the value of that. I think our National Day is so noisy, no one can hear you anyway. And I worry about having to do the speech in Thai for days, even a week in advance. So I don't like to do it. I don't think so.
Yeah.
But how is your Thai now? How good is it?
It's getting better, but you know, I'm still confused by the basic things. So I met with the Prime Minister a couple of weeks ago. He was wearing a mask. I was wearing a mask. And he speaks so fast that everything he said I didn't understand. His interpreter had to explain what he said to me in English, and then I could speak back to him in some halting Thai. So just that basic, quick interaction where people say things and you think, what did they say? If it's textbook Thai, I'm okay.
So how long have you been in Bangkok now?
I've been in Bangkok about a year and 4 months. Yeah, a year and 4 months. So I arrived in January last year.
Okay.
I'd never been here before, and although I'd studied Thai at university, that was 25 to 30 years ago. I was just interested in Asia, but because I'd studied it there, the Prime Minister chose me to come here. So that was that effort paid off eventually.
All right. So, and how do you see Thai-Australian relations?
I met with the Prime Minister just the other day, and we're very keen to push along and take the relationship to a higher level, a strategic partnership. And so that's one of those things that's been delayed a little bit by the diversion to COVID virus, but that's what we'll be pushing forward at the end of the year. Now that's everything from defence and intelligence cooperation through political cooperation, and of course all the commercial and cultural ones. For example, the Prime Minister asked me about cooperation on vaccine development and production, those sorts of epidemiological things, and we were able to say, well, we offered at Thailand a couple of Masters of Public Health scholarships for some of your epidemiologists to come to Australia and study. So I see that sort of, the relationship has grown into a very good position. It's definitely a top 10 relationship for us across so many areas, but it almost has done that without direct political direction over the years. We haven't had many visits by Prime Ministers, maybe one on a bilateral visit over the last couple of decades. We have to rectify those sorts of things. So I was very glad last year when Prime Minister Prayut invited Prime Minister Morrison, and Prime Minister Morrison said, great, I'll try and come next year. So we need more political involvement and direction to drive the strategic partnership, to drive closer relationships on many things. And as I indicated when we started our conversation, when talking about repatriation flights, we work well with Thailand and with Thai people. We like it. So it's a natural partnership.
What would you want to say to Thai students who now may have a second thought about going to Australia after hearing the warning about possible racial discrimination against them?
Well, look, it's a serious thing that I would never dismiss it. But what I would say to them is look at the surveys that say that 95% of students feel very safe there. Talk to some of your Thai friends who have studied there. Talk to the alumni associations. They're quite prominent. They will put you in touch with a whole lot of Thai students who say, it was just such a fantastic experience and they never experienced any discrimination. So, look, I think the experience of, if the people are, young Thai students are prepared to go to Australia, immerse themselves in the university life and Thai culture, they'll find it very rewarding. I don't think that anyone will find any discrimination, and so I would encourage them very much to go.